Hi. So the idea will be five different subjects. Start with Wall Street, then talk about features, then TV and measurement of ratings, then collective bargaining, and then finally a happy ending. Hopefully. So on the Wall Street side, when when I was talking last year, there was a uh, pending merger between Paramount Global and Skydance Redbird. If you all remember that one, we'll probably have something like that to talk about pretty soon. Comcast NBCU announced last year the split off of its linear cable channels. Warner's then followed suit, announcing its own spinoff of linear, but improved its deal for investors by putting 20% of the equity in its parent company into this linear sub to attract, again, investors and boost the linear up to almost digital. EA is in the process of having, I'll call it a leveraged buyout, although even though the lead is a government fund of a country called Saudi Arabia, together with Silver Lake and Affinity, they're in effect in an LBO buying out the equity of the public. So we see a public going private for a change. By contrast, in a sense, Warner's pops up again in a different world. Warner's had an arbitration that it won decisively against Village Roadshow. Village, of course, had co-fied hundreds of Warner's pictures over the term, was objecting to Warner's going day and date in 2021, fought a case that involved that issue and lost. And as a result, Village went into Chapter 11. Along came Alcon, who then purchased the library that Village had, primarily of Warner Pictures, paid $417 million for it. And guess what? Warner's is now challenging that whole transaction because it basically doesn't want to have still another fight with Alcon of the same nature, perhaps, as it had with Village Roadshow. In another weird circumstance, two public companies became one, and that was Lionsgate and Stars. And now one company becomes two, Lionsgate and Stars, each now public entities. So back and forth. Apollo comes in to Legendary, picks up a minority share, and then teams up with the U.S. end of uh, the company of Legendary to buy out the Chinese Wanda, who had founded Legendary or had bought Legendary from its founder many years ago. And then you may have heard that Lachlan Murdoch, with the help of his dad, bought out his siblings and is now largely in control of, I'll call it old Fox, even though it's now new Fox. And then can't help but mention the pending acquisition of WBD by the now a company called Paramount Skydance or P-Sky. Yeah, that's the symbol. That's the stock symbol. Uh, what's going to happen on that is obviously anyone's guess. The weird part of it is that one way or another, we seem to be faced with a change of control in terms of Warner's. Whether that goes the Paramount route or someone else is unknown. That's kind of my Wall Street stuff, except for one recommendation that I'd like to make. There have been two autobiographies written lately, one by John Malone, the other by Barry Diller. They are somewhat, each of them, about Wall Street, but they are also about the history of our businesses. And I really encourage all of you to read them, to capture the history, in each case done with great transparency on the part of Dr. Malone and Mr. Diller. So now let me move to the sports side of Wall Street. And of course, I have to start with a company called TKO for your boxing fans. Not, it is the official name of a live events company that last year had a single digit market cap, which has now doubled this year, while shedding off an agency called Endeavor. So Endeavor is now private. Forget that the current management was there before, put that aside. What we now have is a sports company involved in live entertainment, wrestling, and soon to be boxing, and doing enormously well in the process. By some contrast, there was a company called Venue a year ago. Venue was in the end broken up. That was a joint venture consisting of Disney, Fox, and Warner that was put together to do, I'll call, a short form sports channel. It was sued by a company called Fubo. Fubo was successful at the trial court in getting an injunction against the joint venture. And the end result, the venture collapsed, and Disney is now going to become, pending government approval, a 70% owner of Fubo and trying to do a shorter version of, well, obviously with only themselves as the controlling stockholder, uh, new sports deals. Apple finally, in the, shall we say, walk, or excuse me, Apple is crawl, walk, run. We're now running into F1, the Liberty controlled company, had a contract with ESPN at $90 million a year. Apple comes in and pays $140 million a year and is looking, hopefully, it's a weird way for them to get into the ad sale business, but that's seems to be the approach because Apple still does not have officially in its channels for Apple Plus a well doesn't have as an ordinary course a ad supported channel, just has it in certain programming, which happens to be sports programming. We'll see how that develops. We're also faced, obviously, very recently with a basketball scandal, an indictment, even though the coach that's involved was not involved in the scandal itself. He apparently was involved or is accused to be involved in poker problem. Where this goes is rule unclear. Gambling is big time because of the Supreme Court decision a few years ago. Gambling is legal in 39 states here in the United States, not California, has legalized gambling in large 8 figures and doesn't seem to be going away even with the indictment. So how that plays out will all be notified, both headlines on the front and the sports section of whatever newspaper you're not getting anymore. So let me now move to the theatrical side. 2025 was supposed to be, in quotes, survive till 25. What resulted from that and what's important to track? For me, the most important is movie volume. And by that, I'm looking primarily at the wide release of theatrical motion pictures here in the United States. 2025 looks like less than 100 wide releases here in the US. The handout that was given to you or will be given to you shows you that there have been 1,230 wide release films going back a decade, that is to 2015. So you have an average there of 123 per annum. But what's happened is we're slowing down on the number of features. So the 123 now looking closer to under 100 and at some point into the 80s is insufficient, in my view, to keep the industry anywhere near its peak volume, at least here in the United States. The effect of that will be felt immediately in terms of the number of theaters that survive. It's not at all uh, scary. Well, it is scary. It's not at all, what's the right word? Hard to believe that mom and pop who own the only theater in a small town are not going to be able to survive given the diminished production capacity of the studios and others that contribute to wide releases. If we look at the budget range of pictures, what also becomes apparent is the bigger, the more profitable. Again, in your handout, what you'll see is the most profitable genre, not sorry, forget genre for a moment. The most profitable theatrical budget range are pictures that have a production cost over $200 million. That's followed by pictures having a budget of 100 to 200 million, then 70 to 80 million, then 80 to 90 million, then 90 to 100, then 50 to 60, and we then turn negative, starting with $0 to $10 million budgets, losing money on average over the last 10 years, followed by 10 to 20 million, 20 to 30, 60 to 70, 30 to 40, and finally the worst, 40 to 50. Be careful. By contrast, the top three theater circuits, at least here in the US, if not worldwide, have committed to spend $2.2 billion over the next 3 years to shore up their, I'll call it infrastructure, whether that's better sound, better light, better seats, better food, what have you, all of them making a concerted effort to make film going more attractive. But in the face of declining number of widescreen production, it's going to be hard to manage. In terms of genres, again, the handout that I gave you reflects the most popular of 12 genres is, of all things, animation, followed by action, then sci-fi, musicals, concerts or documentaries, horror, romance, thrillers, drama, comedy, family, westerns. So we have movie volume going down. We have budgets going up. We have genres moving along. And now the most another crucial happening in the future world is, of course, what's happening to sequential distribution, where compared to history, and by history, I mean 5 years ago, the sequencing of the windows in theatrical has changed immensely. The fight today, the theater industry, who bands together in a nonprofit called Cinema United, used to be called NATO, is pushing hard for a 45-day exclusivity for theatricals. The theory being that if we all know that we can, in effect, watch at home 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks after the movie hits the theater, we're going to be arguably deterred from going to the theater. But given what happened during the pandemic, where there were no theaters, and given, I'll call it, the newfound leverage that studios have in their battles with the theaters, it's not likely to happen. There is no more day and date. That's, I think, accepted on and happily on both sides of the argument. And instead, here's what we're dealing with in terms of sequencing and timing. Pest and PVOD, by pest, I mean not what you think. It's premium EST, or premium electronic sell-through, or PVOD, which is premium video on demand, sale and rental. That today, on most pictures, not all, but most, kicks in anywhere from the third weekend to the sixth or seventh weekend after initial theatrical release. We, the consumer, pay $20 to $30, depending on whether we want PEST or PVOD, per transaction. The studio keeps 80% of what we pay. 4 years ago, PEST and PVOD didn't exist. That is, therefore, additive and not cannibalistic, one would argue, to theatrical revenues. Indeed, PEST and PVOD have, in certain cases, triggered over $100 million on tentpole pictures to the studios involved. After PEST and PVOD, we move to what I'm we'll call TVOD, transactional VOD. That's rental only. There we pay, customers pay anywhere from $4 to $7, depending largely on whether you're doing 4K or less. The split there is anywhere from 60 to 70% studio and 30 to 40%, obviously, to the, well, mostly Amazon and Apple. In the steady state, the license period for this is 30 to 60 days post PEST and PVOD. So we're still potentially just 2, 3 months out at that point in time. What follows TVOD is what we used to call pay one, the first window of a premium pay. This is the first, in essence, introduction that we all have to subscription as opposed to transactions. Because when you go to the movie theater, it's a transactional deal. Same with PEST, PVOD, and PVOD. So premium pay, we finally get to subscription, and we're on a rate card. And the way that the world has emerged is there's no longer rivalry between studio and outlet or the pay channel. Instead, the studio and the pay channel are sisters with a common parent company. So the issue arises, at least for those of us who are representing either talent or guilds. How do we know that there is fair market value that's being given in the transaction between sister companies? Eh, I'll leave that up in the air. Following pay one, which is a 12-month license period in the rest of the world, it's 15 to 18 months here in the US. In the US, we go to ad-supported free, so-called free TV, linear or digital. In the rest of the world, what follows pay one is pay two, and then it goes to free TV. We are now 9 years out, and the income from the films seems to be diminishing compared to the past. But then along comes something like an Avatar, which I assume most of you will see at the end of this year. And that may surprise us all and do better than the former Avatar. So that's kind of my gloomy look potentially at theatrical. Now I want to talk about TV and streaming. The markets may vary, but customers primarily use streaming now to watch TV content, with movies right behind on usage. Weirdly enough, China is the exception here. China focuses on live content fueled by esports and video game streaming. The trends, however, TV and stream, are all in favor of social media as an outlet, which has the major advantage of price being zero and the ability easily to serve every niche possible. This fact is evidenced in fueling energy and dollars spent by the leader, Netflix, into local content. And there's probably an indecisiveness on the part of all of the international platforms into whether to invest heavily in broadly appealing hits, if they can find them, on the one hand, or in hyper-targeted, localized titles, whether microdramas, single IP, fast channels, or vertical UGC. Microdramas in China last year at retail did $7 billion, which was greater than China's box office last year. Microdramas are growing very, very fast here and looks also like picking up in Latin America and to be soon in Europe as well. All the platforms are now trying to optimize revenues and profits in particular. Consolidation of some sort seems the most likely, but how or where is, at least to me, perplexing. Look, for example, at Sky Showtime, parent companies NBCU Comcast and Paramount. That's a hard bundle in Europe that is full of, in essence, old pictures from their libraries, plus all their new releases. It has failed commercially. It's lost over $1 billion since it came around several years ago. So consolidation or partial consolidation is troublesome. And while global SVOD revenue will likely increase, my view is it will be on account of higher rates that customers pay rather than added subscriptions. The growth is coming now from hybrid or pure AVOD and FAST outlets where the consumer pays with his time or her time rather than through the pocketbook. And aside from speeding up the addition of subtitles or dubbing to non-native programs AI has not yet played a major role in localizing content, but tools like AI voice synthesis models will probably transform the economics of localization in the near future. And digital ad revenue can in- incrementally raise revenue, even if it doesn't fully offset the inevitable decline of linear ads. And don't look, unfortunately, to broadcast or cable network affiliate and retrans revenue to fill in the gap. That isn't going to happen. UI improvements and streamer integration are the techie contribution to raising revenue, and additional windowing activity will also increase, I think, across the board. It is, however, my belief that content will continue to be made for lower budgets and new kinds of bundling type partnerships. We are moving away, sadly, from scripted TV and scripted movies. And another brief word on AI. AI can support and enhance the creative vision of filmmakers, not replace it. This disruption potential rises as more quote intelligent AI tools are made. There's potential for AI to play a role in all stages of the production process, starting with pre-production, and a major role for AI to play in collective bargaining, which is my next subject. In the next year, the production industry will be occupied, if not preoccupied, with collective bargaining negotiations with the three above the line guilds: writers, actors, directors. I hope I don't need to dwell unduly on what happened the last time around when the three guilds confronted the production companies. The DGA went first and settled. Then came the writers, who went out on strike. Then came the actors, who went out on strike. Then came the writers, who settled. Then came the actors, who settled. And then came the DGA, who, because they had actually settled early on, were left out of the improvements that both writers and actors made. The studios were, I'll call it, nice enough to give the DGA the benefit of the deals that the actors and writers got during their strikes as a result. With the benefit of hindsight, I think we can safely say that the biggest issues then were treatment of AI and foreign and performance residuals. While these issues will reappear in 2026, it's more likely than not that the primary issue will be something radically different, namely the precarious balance of our industry's health plans for each of the three guilds. As insiders know, one of the three guilds has only a 6-month reserve facing its members before, in essence, it topples. No, I'm not going to identify which guild, at least today. Why? Why did this happen? Well, the major reason is that the guild's members have enjoyed what the industry calls a Cadillac plan since 2017. In today's world, I would call it a Rolls-Royce plan. And given the higher costs of maintaining health care for its members, coupled with the decrease in production volume, the plan is running in the red dangerously. The other two guilds are less affected, but nonetheless nervous. Now, to be clear, I am not blaming that guild for negotiating excellent high coverage from the production companies. Nor am I blaming the production companies for reducing the number and cost of programming in order to make their public equity more attractive to the investing community. But what's needed here, my view, is sunlight, not darkness, on both sides. The guilds may have to require their members to give up a number of the perks that they currently enjoy in coverage, in exchange for which will hopefully be a dose of extraordinary size of money put in directly to the industry-wide plans for each of the guilds. Neither side will be happy, but that solution is, in my view, certainly better than having each side castigating the bad guys across the table. Please, please don't point fingers. Just try to find an equitable solution to the problem, if it's at all possible. I now want to share with you a pet peeve of mine. This is in the area of ad or program ratings, and in particular, ad or program measurement. In 1936, roughly 90 years ago, Nielsen became or began counting from a panel the number of listeners to radio programs. Jump forward to this summer, 90 years later, where the warning lights flickered brighter. In the span of 2 weeks, A&E went up for sale The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was canceled. We do not represent, my firm does not represent Stephen Colbert. And in the same time frame, Peacock, the 100% ad-supported domestic streamer, hiked its subscriber fees by 40%, a multiple of the inflation rate. Do these three different events trigger something? What's the subtext? Well, one subtext is pretty clear. The math no longer works for certain shows. Colbert's $60 million in reported ad revenue could no longer support this purported $100 million production cost price tag. But beyond and behind these events, there's an anachronistic challenge of viewer measurement and its translation into currency. Despite the era to come of AI real-time data and always connected devices, we as an industry rely on Nielsen's measurement system. Competitors like VideoAmp, iSpot, or ComScore, all new techie companies, now monitor tens of millions of homes and devices. Yet, year after year, Nielsen, the default currency with well over 90% share of the measurement sector, sets the value for the industry's work. And they still rely on their 42,000 viewing panel going forward, even when they take real-time data into account. This isn't a quirk in history. It's a work and a risk for production economics. Let's look at the first half of this year, January to June, according to industry sources. Nielsen reports a 20% annual decline in the key 25 to 54 demo, whereas the new competitors reported decline of mid-single digits. It defies imagination, in my view, to believe that 20% of viewership suddenly disappeared at the snap of a finger. But the impact of that was real and immediate. Enter Stephen Colbert. The dominant market currency of record, Nielsen, says 280,000 viewers tuned in. VideoAmp says no, it wasn't 280, it was 950. Almost 3 times the size. And if ad sales had pegged the 950 and not the 280, Colbert would be bringing in $180 million of ad revenue, more than covering production costs, separate and apart from contributing to what I'll guess we could call reverse comp that the network commands from its affiliates. To be sure, this undercounting isn't confined to one network or audience. In Q2 of 2025, VideoAmp reported that Fox News generated 640,000 prime time 25 to 54 viewers. Nielsen reported half that. There's a pattern here, and it's costing production companies through suppressed ad revenue, subscriber fee hikes, and ultimately less choice for viewers. Or, as we lawyers might say, maybe it's prime condition for an investigation of Nielsen's monopoly. We have before us an imperative to demand a competitive, accountable, and innovative measurement framework. Measurement must reflect reality. Finally, a happy note. After all the dour statements, I want to complete this presentation on an optimistic note, at least in part. All of us here in this building, Los Angeles, California, should be thrilled with the results of the package of the legislation expanding the scope and size of the cities and states' arguably most prominent industry, film and TV production. This resulted after months of study and lobbying led by Governor Newsom, who set the stage by announcing last year that he would ask the legislature to increase the amount of film tax credits from $330 million a year to $750. And despite howls of going Hollywood or treating the industry as a benefit, research revealed that unlike many other tax credit schemes, supporting the legislation is additive, not destructive or cannibalistic to this state's P&L. As we said throughout the effort, it's the bottom line that matters, not above the line. There was shouting and screaming of many to include above the line talent in the computation of what constitutes a qualified expenditure for purposes of tax credits. By going to, and now I'm going to get into the weeds, by going to a 35% tax rate on credits and resisting the temptation to include above the line talent in the computation of qualified expenditures, the legislation that passed makes our state competitive, not only as against New York, Georgia, New Jersey, etc., but also competitive against Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and other international territories. If you look at the numbers, what in California, a average production cost for an hour show, let's say, is $6 million an episode. The tax credits in California will end up being greater than those in the other states in this country, and arguably very close, but probably better than the rates elsewhere. And the important part of all of this is we have the local artisans' talent to produce here and go home to their families rather than a hotel room somewhere else. So I hope you'll join me in thanking the governor and the legislature for passing this measure and trying to bring back more production both to our state and to our city. And with that, I'm happy to answer a few questions so long as they're not that difficult.
Then what happened to the real estate of the senators under the circumstances? Yeah, senators under the circumstances you've described. AFC's balance sheet is a disaster. Something has to give.
So it's more likely than not that the theaters that are most affected and that basically closed down are the smaller mom and pop types, as opposed to the, let's call it, the stuff that the Westfield and other shopping centers exist. There are brutal negotiations going on now between landlords and and lessees, because most of the theaters are on leases, not on ownership land. And so we'll be looking at that as a scary measurement against continuing along. Increased production is the answer. And what is hopefully going to happen, but it looks very doubtful based on historical numbers, is that we'll need more, I'll call it dramas, rom-coms, and sitcoms to fill in the gap, because the big pictures that are profitable may be unaffordable at the same time. So we're in that really weird balancing phase, and hard to say what's going to happen. Thank you very much.